Alright, Yang and dudes and dudettes, you better go ahead and fill up the gravy bowl and pour it on like that like button and whip up smashed taters and get this video shared because I'm in rare form today. There may be plenty of hostiles on the way after I get done with this video, okay? So let me just say that my pear has officially been prickled. Prickled enough to issue some major corrections. It's been a while since our last correction. But a subscriber brought this to my attention last night, and I looked into it, and you know, I kind of had no choice. To the top of the list it went, my dudes. Had to be done. So you see, this fellow right here, who owns the Don't Walk Run exclamation point Productions, well, he hasn't been too friendly to Yang. Now, I'm in my own comment section every day, engaging in debates with people whom I disagree. You know, I love moving a conversation forward to finding middle ground. It's something I actually enjoy. But this man's too generous. This beta male, no, accurate but a little mean. Let's just go with guy. Yeah, the guy. We shall call him the guy. This is how bad my pear is prickled, man. I'm not even going to do this guy the courtesy of looking up his name. Anyway, this guy isn't dishing out legitimate critique so much as ignoring reality and spreading misinformation, as you can see by the like to dislike ratio that is growing by the hour. I haven't watched it all, but like the first 4 minutes, so you guys are like getting my genuine reaction here, my genuine rebuttal. I think I am like what the SJWs call it, triggered, right? That's probably his intention, you know, as our trolls. Anyway, my blood is a boiling, so we're gonna get hard in on this. We're gonna jump in hard with the corrections. I'm about to go in on this dude, so forgive me, Yang Gang, but you'll see why in just a second. Let's hope we make it through. I'm not sure if I can. There's a lot to correct here.
Roll it! Andrew Yang, a presidential candidate who has been running on a platform of giving Americans a freedom dividend of $1,000 a month. This is probably the first time you're hearing about Yang because I've never featured him on the channel before. Anyway, for the first time this election cycle, Andrew Yang has failed to qualify for a Democratic presidential debate. To qualify for the 7th debate, candidates needed to receive donations from 225,000 individual donors and score at least 5% in 4 different polls, or 7% in 2 polls from early primary states. While Yang easily met the 225,000 individual donor qualification, he only got 5% in 1 national poll and 1 early state poll. And the truth is, if you've been running for over 2 years and the highest number that you can hit in a DNC approved poll is 5%, then that might be a sign that you're not going to be the Democratic nominee.
We gotta stop already. A minute in and he has already spread so many establishment misconceptions and obviously hasn't done even the slightest amount of research as to why Andrew Yang is pulling at these numbers. It took everything I had not to pause several times within this very minute. Yes, the polls are rigged. Not just rigged against Yang, but rigged against Tulsi, and they will be rigged against Bernie as soon as they try to get Yang out of the picture, but we're not gonna let that happen. Anyway, I'm sure, you know, you talk about this later, guy, and I'll correct you then too, with proof and facts to back it up. He is polling low due to the DNC artificially choosing to break from historical norms surrounding the January debate. Historically, the thresholds would have been a little bit lower, but never mind that, because the real kicker is instead of releasing immediate polls after the December debate, a debate of which Andrew Yang was the most searched and claimed to be one of the winners via CNN's Chris Cuomo, right? As historical norms suggest, Yang would have immediately broke through the raised threshold, but no. What's your name? Oh yeah, Guy. They artificially choose to pick a majority of polls already used from the previous debate. The ones they chose all had Yang already under the threshold and the poll results were locked. That's the same as starting a marathon and the coach saying, you, Guy, you specifically, no one else, you have to start out of bounds. Okay, now that you walked out of bounds, you can't run in the race and you don't qualify for the next one. That's the equivalent of what just happened to Andrew Yang. And we'll get more into this. So they chose one poll for Amy Klobuchar that did really well from the older ones. They chose that one that actually represented her well. They disproportionately represented Andrew Yang. And then guess what? They released a fraction of the polls they had been historically accepting that very same year. In the previous month, there's so many more polls. And then you look at every single election year past, there's so many more polls during this time frame. Why during this time of this year would they arbitrarily decide to take old polls and release very few? And it only disproportionately affects one candidate. Why would they do that? Especially if they claim to be all about inclusivity, right? Every single one of the very few polls, but one from New Hampshire poll, wasn't even conducted in the early states, as they always have been, because that's where the best results are taking place. And on top of all of that, he met polls before the deadline, a poll in Iowa. If they would have released the regular amount of polls that they normally accept in any other election cycle, or any sort of polling, the DNC, just selectively gathered and cherry-picked certain records. Oh, and there is, also anecdotal evidence of many, many people being polled and never even having Yang listed as an option. Yes, it's anecdotal, I know, but after so many... it's kind of like a Bill Cosby thing, all 70 of them, not all of them can be wrong, can be lying, you know what I'm saying? So the fact is, the DNC arbitrarily changed the rules on a whim to suit their political agenda and put their weight on the scales against any candidate they deem a threat and will provide a real change, as shown by Bernie and Larry Lessig in 2016. Speaking of the DNC, Lessig and changing the rules, they did it to Larry.
Was to be in those debates. But last week, we learned that the Democratic Party has changed its rules for inclusion in the debate. And under the new rule, unless we can time travel, there is no way that I will qualify. Until this week, the rule was 3 polls, finding me at 1% in the 6 weeks prior to the debate. Last week, we began to get close. 2 polls found me at 1%, 1 more, and I would be in the second debate, under the original rule. But under the new rule, the standard is 3 polls at least 6 weeks before the debate. That means I would have had to have qualified at the beginning of October, which means that nothing that happened...
So, sounds kind of familiar, right? I know, Mr. Guy, you will say, but they are a private company and an entity, and they can make up their own rules, sure, but doesn't make it any less corrupt or immoral or undemocratic. So spare me that non-argument, because I know you probably would, right? So, man, mashed potatoes and mother-loving gravy, all that was for just 1 dang minute. Let's hope the rest of this don't go the same way. Oh, man. All right, let's continue.
But is reality gonna stop Andrew Yang and the Yang Gang? Yeah, right.
Aw, look at the edgy joke. How cute. Reality? Yeah, it kind of seems like projection on your part, bro. Sorry.
Yang's campaign reported that it raised $16.5 million in the fourth quarter of 2019. And that's a lot of money for someone with a Real Clear Politics polling average of only 3.5%. So why isn't Yang polling higher nationally? Maybe it's because it's hard to take him seriously.
16.5 million. 16.5 million. You just said he raised a frick ton. It is a crazy amount for someone polling so low, huh? Yeah, Mr. Guy, yeah, that's your name, right? Go ahead and try to act like it isn't an anomaly that's blowing your mind right now. A huge amount for such a low poll number, right? But yet you claim that no one takes him seriously. Are you serious? Apparently he is $16.5 million worth of supporters taking him seriously enough to donate. I've watched a minute ahead, so I know you talk about how he goes on to the cable networks. And, well, now wouldn't that mean that they're taking him serious? Would Elon Musk, Tommy Chong, Dave Chappelle, Donald Glover, Nicolas Cage, Casey Neistat, and the list goes on, including sitting members of Congress and Senate, and a guy I know nothing about named Iga, the McCommon sex roast me about a couple days ago. So do these people not take him seriously? Serious enough to have endorsements? I know celebrity endorsements are like trophies; they don't really mean anything, but they have weight behind their names and seriousness. If a celebrity is coming out for you, you're making some sort of sense right? So, or does that not matter or contribute to his seriousness? Is it because it's rigged? More proof? I can give you more proof. Debbie Wasserman Schultz, what about her? Yeah, right. She was forced to resign because of campaign corruption and election, meddling via DNC against Bernie for Hillary, and then she was promoted to HRC's campaign manager. Do you know how deep the rot has to go for the DNC to manipulate ballots? So yes, let's just pretend as if the DNC is holier than thou institution and they've done nothing wrong now because they outed Debbie. Everything's fine, right? The entire establishment is corrupt, and one person didn't change anything unless you are daft enough to actually believe that. Tap dance around it, do some mental gymnastics, do whatever you gotta do to make your narrative fit. It doesn't matter to me. They are corrupt, and there's well documented proof. And just because you don't like Andrew Yang doesn't mean it's not happening to him.
For example, Yang refuses to wear a tie on the debate stage.
You know what the talking heads couldn't stop talking about after the last debate? It's not the fact that I'm somehow number 4 on this stage in national polling. It was the fact that I wasn't wearing a tie.
Then maybe if you wore a tie, people wouldn't be talking about how you didn't wear a tie. It's not brain surgery.
Oh my, the tie thing. Really, how thick is your skin, dude? Did you lose your mind while making your rant, or just completely miss the point? Are you just deciding to find something to arbitrarily be mad about just for the sake of the video? Let me help you out. Guy, yeah, that's your name. Yang's point is that people in the media are more worried about the article of clothing he is or isn't wearing, besides discussing the real issues or policies or why America is the way it is in some regards. He isn't baffled by why they are confused about his attire. He is mocking them. If your bar for becoming president is so low that not wearing a tie upsets you, then that's your problem, and you and your therapist are going to have to sort that out, my guy.
Then, for the first 3 debates, Yang wore an American flag pin on his lapel, which is a very presidential thing to do. But starting with the 4th debate, Yang wore a math pin. If you didn't know, math is short for Make America Think Harder. Clever.
Yeah. About as clever as your reality joke, right? Yeah.
And you could purchase this math brand math pin on his campaign website for the low price of only $15. But only if you were an early adopter, because 2 debates later, the price was raised to $20. Personally, I don't care what Yang wears. I'm a senior political analyst that wears video game t-shirts. But the reality is, if you want to look presidential, you need to attempt to look presidential. And while sporting a $20 novelty pin and refusing to wear a tie might not be hurting his chances, it certainly isn't helping him.
See, this right here just shows just how disingenuous you are. Yeah, the math slogan was a throwaway line at first, but all of a sudden it caught on and it stuck, and it was becoming big and that kind of makes it more valuable, right? When you have so many more people trying to get something that has limited quantities of, and you have to make more, right? And unable to keep up with orders, you tend to raise your price because the value is now higher because the popularity. Add supply and demand, and with a little common sense, and there you go. See, it's not so hard. It's not, you got this. It just takes a little bit of brain power.
Besides, it's likely other things that are holding him back.
Rolling in on the Gatsby. Oh my God, here comes the next president of the United States.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's just a joke.
That's a joke, that's right. That's a full-service presidential candidate. Yeah.
What did Ethan and Elon do? Why? Hope that's not like the opposite of Semitic. A wholesome and humorous, down-to-earth New Hampshire office opening tradition is bad. Okay. And you can't crowd surf either if you're president. Mr. Guy says that's a bad thing. No one takes you seriously that way. They only take him serious enough to rig the election against him.
But no. It's not that Yang is a meme candidate. There is a more nefarious reason that he isn't polling higher. It's the Yang media blackout. And I'm sure you're thinking, I see Andrew Yang featured all the time on mainstream media. Like, all the time. Is this a joke?
Your polling numbers are still low.
Well, I'm new to most Americans.
Okay, first off, I have to stop this little dig right here. I mean, he's been running for 2 years. Yes, but dude, you act like he was this popular from day one, as he is today. It's a little thing called the Joe Rogan experience, okay? Just do a little bit of research. That's when people had just started to hear about him. That's how he started catching on mainstream. And then people like me and a couple other people started making videos about him, memes about him, and started catching on, and other people started following suit. And then we just actually built a grassroots coalition that the media couldn't ignore. You know, we would tank the ratings because we just wouldn't show up for a show. We're still doing that. So, misleading with no shame, that's what you're doing. Trying as hard as you can to twist one thing into something that it isn't, and then blame him for it. Yang. Bernie has been in it since the dinosaur age, right? Since at least the Triassic period, minimum, right? So, I mean, no one knew who Yang was at all. Zero name recognition. You know, I mean, kind of like you, right? Anyway, only once the memes, you know, they kind of are a thing, and they did further his reach after the Joe Rogan podcast. And there are many, many more than the few you cherry pick and make him look bad about, like my entire corrected list, where I use the Ben Shapiro meme format to propel him into the right-leaning demographic, because I am a conservative, just doing this meme format, attracting bipartisan support. And these videos are of Yang utterly destroying people, far smarter than you, with a smile on his face. And guess what, guy? You're on that list now. Congratulations.
And as soon as people find out more about me and my vision for the country, how we need to humanize our economy and make it work for us and our families, then we see consistent increases in support. And that's one reason why I'm doing so well. It's certainly not that the media has been fueling my rise, though full credit to you all, because you all have been an exception to this. I've been incredibly grateful for being able to come here on the show.
Yang makes it sound like no one else will have him on their shows. But as you can see, he's been invited by the largest mainstream media outlets to appear on their top-rated programming. He's been given tons of exposure, yet he comes across as ungrateful and entitled when he claims that the amount of airtime he's received isn't fueling his campaign in any way. But yeah, if it wasn't for this Yang media blackout, he'd be a top-tier candidate. Sad, really.
Okay, your ignorance knows no bounds, Mr. Guy. Okay, so let me walk you through this one. Now, pay attention. When Yang talks about the media blackout and not being favorable to him, he is not referring to the amount of airtime in which he gets, which is still far lower than many other candidates polling lower than him, Tulsi being one, Pete Buttigieg and Kamala being third before she dropped out, and more than not, they brought him on to smear him anyways with some white nationalist claims, you know, like Chris Matthews. You know what I'm talking about. So yeah, real fair coverage, right? So much of it. I wonder why he's polling so low, right? Anyway, he isn't talking about airtime. He is talking about the over 50 documented shade throws, accounts of the media purposefully. Even if some of them aren't purposely, some of them have to be. Even if most of them aren't, some of them have to be. Media purposely making graphical errors on only him and only with Tulsi and one exception. This is easily researched, and I hope you aren't daft enough to not include this. I hope this is further in the video so I can correct that too. You just genuinely took Yang's legitimate argument and applied it to a facet that had nothing to do with the context of his complaint. Yeah, you're some analyst, ain't you, Guy? Yeah.
An example of this so-called media blackout is from November 2019.
Okay, so you did include one. Well, queued that one right up there, didn't you? So far from November, oh boy, let's see how you misrepresent this one, man. All right, let me get strapped in my seat here.
When MSNBC ran a story with this graphic that didn't include Yang's name on it. On Twitter, Scott Santens, one of Yang's biggest cheerleaders, was furious, saying that Andrew Yang should have been featured on this graphic because New Hampshire voters' firm support for him was at 42%, and added a screenshot of the poll question and results. First, what do these numbers represent? Well, let's take a look at the poll itself. Question number 8. Thinking about your first choice, Is your mind firmly made up? Or do you think that you might change your mind before the New Hampshire primary? Out of 500 poll respondents, 391 had a first choice candidate. 78 of them listed Sanders as their first choice. 69 listed Warren. 67 listed Buttigieg. 60 listed Biden. And 31 listed Gabbard. But what about Andrew Yang? Of those 391 respondents, 19 listed Yang as their first choice. And only 8 of those 19 people have their minds definitely made up, which is 42%. Which means that 58% of Yang supporters said that they might change their mind before the New Hampshire primary. As you can see, the numbers are not impressive when you dig into the actual poll question. And quite frankly, I'm not sure why MSNBC would even show the results of it, because those percentages are meaningless without knowing the number of voters.
Wow. Where do I begin? You are more than disingenuous right here. I mean, by your own claim, if you don't know the amount of voters, then none should be shown, right? If Yang should be shown by that default, then the other ones shouldn't be, right? I mean, the fact is the media chose to exclude the only 2 viable candidates that were within striking distance of their beloved establishment hacks. Any other graphic you can see will show, blackout, right? Because they show the trailing in campaigns that are catching up with the front runners. When you just show the front runners, you're just trying to pretend like those are the only ones who's actually running, and the other ones are doing a lot worse than what they actually are when you don't show them. So yeah, the only 2 viable candidates that were within striking distance of their beloved establishment hacks, and I include Bend Over Bernie here too, they chose to hide their admittedly modest but growing support from the people. They got to choose what the American audience who watches network TV, what candidates they decided to pretend only had a choice when there were 2 candidates that made the poll. There were front runners, but would there have been, on that graphic if it was Booker or Klobuchar, if they were polling that high at that time? You're going, through a bit more, but you are already so misleading. There's a little bit you're going through, but you're just so misleading. I should get a laugh out of these next few. I mean, Jesus, man. Okay, let's see how you stretch, a lie out of this one.
Another example of the Yang media blackout was on January 6th, when USA Today tweeted out an article about the presidential candidates, but included this graphic, which didn't include Andrew Yang. But it also features these 5 candidates who all dropped out of the race. And while Andrew Yang is nowhere to be found, neither is Tom Steyer, Senator Elizabeth Warren, or Mike Bloomberg. But then, USA Today apologized and claimed that they posted the wrong graphic, which was clearly months old. And if it was a Yang media blackout, they wouldn't have featured him in the article.
Okay, wow. So, out of over 50 graphics, he has been left out of, you can only find 2 or 3, of which, one I've just debunked, so that leaves 2. Yeah, you really just disproved the blackout, didn't you? You found 2 examples out of 50. Well, here, let me introduce you to the 48 other ones you so cunningly decided to pretend doesn't exist.
Then, on January 4th, Fair.org wrote a piece claiming that the media leave Yang out of candidate conversations, and give the example of how Andrew Yang only got to speak for a total of 10 minutes and 56 seconds during the December debate, compared to Senator Amy Klobuchar, who spoke for 19 minutes and 53 seconds. But what Fair fails to recognize is that Klobuchar is a very aggressive debater who continually looks for opportunities to interrupt and interject her opinion.
In the imperative that we win this election.
Could I respond?
This is our chance.
Very brief. I just want to make very clear, Mayor, that the freedom of the press is deep in my heart.
And just from this one instance, Senator Klobuchar gained 45 seconds of speaking time. Then she attacked Mayor Pete on his experience, and from that exchange, she gained another 2 minutes and 14 seconds of speaking time. Andrew Yang, on the other hand, is the least aggressive candidate on the debate stage. The other candidates are constantly raising their hands fighting for airtime, but when Yang raises his hand, which is rare, it seems half-hearted compared to everyone else. He never argues one-on-one with the other candidates on policy, and rarely speaks unless called on by the moderators, who are busy pointing their questions to the top-tier candidates. The only person stopping Yang from interjecting more is Andrew Yang.
Wrong again, Bob. I don't see why you haven't addressed this yet. The first debate, Yang's mic was cut, and as far as Klobuchar being an aggressive debater, that may be so, but Yang comes off from championship debates. He comes from that, where there are rules of engagement and not speaking out of turn for fear of losing points. Here there are no points, but the candidates did sign on to a sort of non-aggression pact with one another, and Yang heeded that, as the rest should have. He did what was expected of him while the others didn't. Perhaps it's to his own fault, but that still doesn't excuse it. He's been treated like a redheaded stepchild from day one. You add her time, Klobuchar, but you failed to mention the moderator. They have a job to do, and they allow them to continue unfettered. They only allow the candidates that they like to continue unfettered, while they always step in on Yang or Tulsi whenever she was there. Or he'll just finish on time like he's supposed to do, and the other ones don't. Of course, that's the political game, and they're used to playing that. He's not. I get that, but don't have rules and stuff like that if you're going to arbitrarily enforce them on certain candidates and not the other ones, right? It's just, I don't see how you can watch that debate and be like, hey, moderator, quit letting her talk for 2 extra minutes. And then when Yang starts talking over his time, they cut him off. Like, okay, sure, that makes just a coincidence, right?
Another so-called Yang media blackout moment was on January 8th, 2020, when CNBC showed this graphic of fourth quarter fundraising results. However, the Yang Gang was quick to point out that the photos they used for Andrew Yang and Tulsi Gabbard were actually of venture capitalist Jeff Yang and Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. Graphics like this usually need to be made from scratch, and my guess is that they pulled images of the candidates from an internal server and used the wrong Yang. And to be fair, both Andrew Yang and Jeff Yang seem to have a thing against ties, so it seems like an honest mistake. As for Gabbard being replaced with Gillibrand, well, both have the letter G in their last names, I don't know. But to a bigger point, saying that it's part of a Yang media blackout makes no sense, because despite using the wrong photo of Andrew Yang, they were still reporting on the amount of money that Andrew Yang raised. If it was a media blackout, he would not have been mentioned. And I'm not defending CNBC, because at this stage of the 2020 cycle, CNBC's producers should know what the candidates look like, and mistakes like this make them look pretty incompetent.
Okay, this is by far your biggest bruh moment. An honest mistake? Really? Okay, let's pretend like there isn't 50 plus documented graphical errors for a second. Let's wipe all that away. Do you honestly believe that a news media company whose day-to-day job, especially graphic artists and for sure some directorial oversight people, happens to be there because they don't do journalism anymore, they just take words from the top down, as seen with the CNN debacle and their CEO saying only impeachment, right? Is it to come there every day and like a production studio put together a show where they deliver supposed accurate news to the people, that the people who work in news doesn't know these candidates' faces by heart yet? Didn't you just say Andrew Yang's been running for 2 years? And so, like, in that respect, I agree with you. They should. You're right for saying that they should know what they look like. But they smeared Tulsi about Russia on CNBC, I think it was. Well, the alphabet soup, they get me. But they smear her on their weekly, and they damn sure don't forget what her graphic looks like whenever they need to smear her, and it's their job to know. Like you said, he has been running for 2 years. They can't tell an Andrew from a Jeff just because they look alike. Sure, you say Thai, but I kind of hear Asian, a little sort of racy, bro. You know what I'm saying? If that was Cory Booker mixed up with another black man, the SJW Black Lives Matter would storm their studio during the commercial break, and they would be begging for forgiveness, right? If you think that this was an honest mistake at this point, man, well, I've got an island to sell to you. It's real cheap. I think you'll love it. Dude, you'll believe anything. Benefit of the doubt for all except for Yang should be your motto, bro.
But to their credit, they quickly remade the graphic and issued an on-air apology. Because if you make a mistake, you take responsibility, and that's the right thing to do. Unless you're Andrew Yang.
Okay then. You want to go there? I think I know where you're going with this. All right, Jimmy Crack Corn, I don't care. Let's go.
On January 4th, Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose announced that due to an error by Yang's campaign, Yang will not appear on the Ohio primary ballot. In Ohio, they use what is called a part petition. For every page of signatures, this form with the signature of the person circulating the petition, as well as this declaration of candidacy form, needs to also be submitted. So to clarify, when you submit these 2 pages of signatures, it needs to be accompanied by the page with the declaration, which Yang's campaign failed to do. Instead, they basically treated the declaration form like a fax cover letter when these 3 forms are supposed to go together. Yang responded to this by saying, "My campaign submitted nearly 3 times the amount of signatures needed, virtually ensuring that I would be on the ballot in Ohio. Nevertheless, because of a bureaucratic paperwork issue caused by an awkwardly worded law, nearly 3,000 Ohioans' First Amendment rights have been denied." It's not Yang's fault, you guys. It's Ohio's awkwardly worded law. A law that virtually the rest of the Democratic candidates were able to follow. But instead of taking responsibility, Yang's crying voter suppression. Yang went on to say, "As a non-politician, it's unfathomable that this could happen." Don't you see? He's a non-politician. You can't expect him to follow basic instructions.
Another lie. Okay, so here is him taking responsibility. So yeah, lie again, Bob. Sorry, guy. Just because someone in the new campaign didn't realize a minor oversight doesn't make what Yang said not a factual statement. Voters are being suppressed and it is the campaign's fault, but a very easy error to correct, so why can't it be? All the information was correct. There just wasn't duplicates per each stack, and many now are silenced at the ballot box because Ohio legislature denied Yang the ability to fix or amend. Clearly, those people signed in overwhelming numbers, but because they didn't allow for a path to correct, that means that they suppressed their constituents' votes. They pretty much said you cannot vote for Andrew Yang because of one little minor thing that could have been fixed, but we're not going to let it fix. So we're not going to let it fixed. It's a factual statement, Andrew Yang said. Even every other state allows for like the cover page, like you mentioned. So, okay, mistake made. So why not allow us to print the duplicates and correct the error? How is that so hard? Oh yeah, because this shit's rigged. And all the politicians are all in the establishment and in bed together, as we have documented while correcting you. And also, for your last point, I don't know if you have ever even owned, worked, or hell, even walked into any sort of business of any kind. There's like a hierarchy. Let me get that word out. So now stick with me, little guy here. Just stick with me. There's a CEO. In our case, that would be Yang. Then a general manager, and then a shift manager, and then so on, and then down to you get hourly employees, right? If the shift manager fails to fill a shift, does the employee or customer then turn to the CEO and say, "It's all your fault. You did this. There is no context or nuance. You are in charge," and that's that? Does that happen? Does the CEO say, "You're right, and I'll fire myself on the spot so that this never happens again"? No, they correct the error and they don't say, "Oh, well, this shift doesn't get filled now. Too bad." No, they don't say that. They fix and reprimand, but I guess that's just too hard. Why would you make that decision? Sucks when the Yang Gang votes against Ohio's politicians and this upcoming re-election next time around. Man, that governor sucks for you, man. You should have seen how many people across your state signed and now will vote against you next time. So good luck for that. You just secured your ticket out the door. Enjoy your 4 years.
A word of advice: if you want one of those math pins, you better buy one now before the price goes up to cover the extra resources needed to run a write-in campaign.
Okay, now you're just being a cunt.
But Yang isn't just the victim of awkwardly worded laws, it's the lack of polls. The Daily Beast reported that Andrew Yang sent a letter to DNC Chairman Tom Perez in December urging him to commission 4 early primary state polls. With the upcoming holidays and meager number of polls currently out in the field, a diverse set of candidates might be absent from the stage in Des Moines for reasons out of anyone's control. More polls would provide an accurate snapshot of the current state of the race and where voters' hearts and minds are. Thus, getting ahead of an imminent problem. Before the December debate, there were 17 polls commissioned, and Andrew Yang only hit 5% in one of them. Yang's argument is that the polls commissioned before the December debate don't reflect how voters might feel after the December debate. So if the DNC ordered more polls, Yang and other diverse candidates would poll better and therefore qualify for the next debate. But the problem with Yang's theory is that it doesn't quite hold water. Because when you look at the results from these 6 early primary state polls taken after the December debate, Yang's numbers didn't improve for him enough to qualify for the January debate, as he needed to hit 7% in 2 of them or 5% in 3 out of the 6. So out of the 23 DNC approved polls, Yang only hit the 5% threshold in 2 of them. And at that rate, you'd need to commission another 24 polls for Yang to meet the January debate threshold. But you know, if it wasn't for CNBC featuring the wrong pick of Yang for 10 seconds in a graphic, or Ohio and their arcane election laws, or NBC turning his mic off during the first debate, or the DNC and their lack of polling, or the Christmas holiday, or this damn media blackout, Yang would totally be a top-tier candidate. Yang Gang, stop trying to make Andrew Yang happen. It's not going to happen.
What do you mean more polls doesn't hold up? What this guy isn't telling you guys is those polls that he just mentioned were already scheduled and predetermined. Like I proved earlier, there were a whole host of independent and reputable polls that were conducted in parallel and around the qualifying times that were historically always chosen and in greater quantity, but this time old disqualifying polls from the previous debate threshold and none after the debate per historical precedent, and hand-picked polls that have historically showed favorability to which candidate the establishment would appear to back. Yeah, and the few polls, none of which, was in the states which mattered. And yes, Mr. Guy, there was 20 some odd polls, but what you keep failing to mention is that half of which were, again, old polls that were locked and automatically counted against him. And it's so ironic just how accurate your last sarcastic, sewage-drenched comment is. You're right, Mr. Guy. You're right. You are. If it wasn't for all that and more being orchestrated against him, yeah, he would be on that stage. You're right. Even the moderator says so, or the host. So make no mistake, all this was done arbitrarily with no one to be harmed by it but Yang. Every time the DNC made a change, the only one it disproportionately affected was Andrew Yang. They red-gated Tulsi out, and now they are gunning for Yang, and all because they don't want to have a primary full of anti-establishment candidates because Bernie is enough to scare the lobbyists right out of their back pocket. Imagine if there's 3 of us. So, to think it's a mere coincidence due only to Yang's own pitfalls exclusively just shows me you are a willing establishment hack at worst, or at best an incompetent at analyzing data trends, which apparently you claim is your job. So, seriously though, you know what you're doing. You are misappropriating facts and twisting them to fit your narrative. I didn't do any research on you, but I can tell you have a biased angle, and not even a well-educated one. Just a beta male whose mommy bought him a microphone and a computer one day for his birthday. Too far? Fuck it. He's spreading too much false information. Anyways, he deserves it. I'll be petty for once, guys. Alright, so, by the way, we have stopped making him a thing because he is one now. I have a feeling you're going to get tired of hearing about Andrew Yang for years to come, buddy. You better gear up. Even if he isn't elected, your video won't age well. Congratulations, you are correct.